pleasure talking to you, Bryan. You've been part of the X-Men universe for such a long time now, but it keeps getting interesting because the characters always evolve in completely different ways. Is that what keeps, your interest spiked?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to make the same movie over and over again. I would go crazy probably. But I love these characters. I love these actors, both the older and the new cast, and the new cast in this movie. They're just all so wonderful. So I just make it a point to make sure that before I dive into it, the villain, the structure, the story, it just be so different from the previous ones. And with Apocalypse, the notion of ancient mutanism, gods or false gods, and such, potential for global stakes and destruction was something I hadn't explored in an X-Men movie yet. This is also a movie that is not, just about the introduction of a new kind of villain that makes no distinction between humans and mutants, very different from Magneto, but also it's about the birth of the X-Men. And this is something I was involved in when they were already established, or as characters, when I did X-Men 1 and 2. Well, now, I worked my way to where I can say how they got there.
Yeah, no, it's really cool and interesting, and I enjoyed the Egyptology aspect as well. How much did you know about Egyptology? Obviously, you didn't film in Cairo, but you kind of rendered Cairo in a nice way. Tell us about that element.
Well, I've always been a huge fan and fascinated with ancient Egyptian culture. Ever since I was in 5th grade when I made my Tutankhamun coffin with all the little sarcophagus for the organs and whatnot. I just the purity and the design and symmetry of ancient Egypt was so impressive to me as a boy. The pyramids, the notion of pyramids having powers. So it was fun to bring that to life in this movie, and to also demonstrate a sense of order and symmetry, the kind of thing that when Apocalypse wakes over 4,000 years later, he sees the opposite of in the world. He sees the world is now interconnected. It's one giant civilization that's worshiping false gods, not him, because he believes he's a real god. Yeah. He sees a lack of order, hubris, nuclear weapons, and he just says no. For people, nations called superpowers, he's like, I'm not going to have any of that. I'm going to go back to this beautiful, orderly, symmetrical world in devotion to me. Not me, but
to his own social media following.
Exactly.
Talking with Oscar that he needs to develop his Instagram following.
Exactly. But just remember, there's a difference between followers and friends.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes today's society get them mixed up.
Well, what I find interesting about the X-Men is that no one is good or bad in their heads. They're all convinced of their own abilities. Apocalypse is a great example of that. He's not a villain in his mind. Everyone is doing the right thing. This is what I think makes those characters so interesting to follow and complex from the beginning, right?
Absolutely. All great villains believe they're, doing something for the betterment of their country or the world. They believe they're liberating people they're ultimately invading. They believe they're purifying when they're ultimately annihilating. That mentality affects all villains in ancient and modern history, and a lot of casualties result.